A lot of the people I know that I would call geniuses, they didn't have it easy, and really all of them are gone. They're long gone. They checked out pretty young. I don't know what that's about, but I've noticed it happening, with more than one person that I've known. That's been the story.
Welcome to The Creative Asylum, a weekly podcast that digs deep into the minds of visionary creators of all stripes. Musicians, actors, filmmakers, writers, artists, cartoonists, and cultural disruptors. Here, we'll discuss perspectives on living life on your own terms. Life lessons that keep us grounded, insane, and sometimes pull us back from the edge. So, take a deep breath, loosen your grip on the bland and the boring. This is your weekly prescription for authentic living, creative clarity, and hopefully, a little bit of cultural rebellion.
Side effects may include spontaneous joy, existential epiphanies, and an uncontrollable urge to do weird and beautiful things.
Hey, everybody. It's the day before Christmas, 2025. Welcome to the Creative Asylum. I am your host, Daniel House. Today's guest, the second from final episode for the season one, is with Dave Markey. He is a Los Angeles-based director, kind of an underground punk rock director who's been making movies for, most of his life. But his first official movie was the Slog movie, kind of a companion piece to Decline of Western Civilization back in 1980. He first kind of broke through and got the attention of more of the punk rock underground community with his Desperate Teenage Love Dolls movie in 1984, which had a follow-up of Love Doll Superstar, which was also co-written by the McDonald brothers of Red Kross. He used to be in a band called Painted Willie, who are on SST Records. You may know of them. He's made a number of movies. He's also made a number of music videos for different bands. In 1992, he released the pretty well-known and lauded music documentary 1991, The Year That Punk Broke, which basically is a documentary covering the European tour of Sonic Youth when they took Nirvana over as their opening band. And this is really a great snapshot of two bands at their absolute peak. Nirvana were absolutely on fire. And this was right before they broke and became, for a while, the biggest band in the world. Anyway, his new film, which is going to be releasing more broadly and officially in January, is called The Secret Lives of Bill Bartell. I've seen it, and frankly, I think it's the best movie he's done. It's an incredibly compelling, curious, interesting, fascinating story about somebody you may have never heard of, but by the time you're done, you're just going to want to see more. Anyway, like I said, this is the second to last episode of the first season of the Creative Asylum. And if you've gotten this far, I appreciate the fact that you've been here through this whole journey. Our final episode will be in a week with Skycry's Mary founder, Roderick Wilgamot, who is also a world-renowned treehouse builder. Anyway, it's really exciting we've gotten this far. 14 episodes so far in this year. The final episode of this season will be next week, and then we'll start season 2, the first Tuesday in January. Anyway, glad you're here. Hope you watch the whole thing. Here it is, conversation with David Markey. Hello, David Markey. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you agreeing to do the Creative Asylum with me, and especially in preparation for your very soon-to-be-released film, The Secret Lives of Bill Bartell, a film which I enjoyed immensely. Meant to watch it twice before we talked, but I've still only watched it the one time.
I've seen it a million times.
Well, I'm sure you have, in every possible, every version, I'm sure. Well, let's just start there. What initially inspired this particular film? Because I'm sure every film has a seed.
This was a movie that I was going to make way back in the 90s, and I even had the title for it. Obviously, that film I would have made in the 90s would not have been this film. Bill was a friend of mine for many years, and at that point in around, I guess, 94, when I first attempted this project, Bill just wasn't cooperative at all. And
Really?
yeah, as much as he loved attention, he was not ready to be the subject of a documentary film that I was making. So, obviously it just wasn't going to happen at that point in time, and then had to fester for many years. And Brian Key, who had approached me a number of years ago about making a film about Bill, and I said, sure, I'd love to give it another shot. And this had been close to a decade after Bill had passed. So we both felt that there was a need to do such a film and tell such a story, an unbelievable story that, as you told it, it just sounded more and more like a put on. And
Yes.
that was sort of Bill's thing. I mean, Bill liked to put people on. That's sort of like who he was on one level. I mean, I use like Andy Kaufman as a reference, just in the sense that he was sort of this performance artist who really no stage was too small for him. I mean, I'm not even speaking about the punk rock stages that he played with his band. I'm talking about in day-to-day life. He was a prankster. He
seemed to be engaged in theater, but as part of real life.
absolutely.
So I found the film really fascinating because I think watching it, I realized I knew who he was, but I never actually knew who he was, if that makes sense. Like all the references, all the bands, I knew of White Flag, but not intimately.
I was well aware that the world had no idea who Bill was, and even
Yeah.
Bill's friends had no idea who Bill
Right.
was.
And I remember Gasatanka as well, same
Right.
kind of thing.
Kind of an influential label,
Yeah,
that kind of really
yeah.
flew in under the radar, but he had decent distribution, and his records got around, and some of them were very influential, especially that Red Cross record that he did. Many people in Seattle up there had talked about that Teen Babes record.
But yeah.
The Melvins and Mudhoney and so forth. It sort of was one of the seedlings, I think, of inspiration to that scene up there.
Yeah. One of many, but yes. It's one of those records that I think was always revered, and I don't remember at what point I first discovered that record, but at that point I was already a Red Cross fan, but kind of went back because wasn't initially aware of its existence until after I'd been aware of Red Cross already, I think at that point.
I shot the album cover for that.
That's cool.
Yeah, that picture was mine. I mean, the band was in sort of a messy state at that point, and
yeah. Well, they were kids, right?
yeah, they were,
More or
kids
less?
that were evolving. They'd already,
Uh-huh.
at that point in '84, they'd been a band for 5 years.
That's amazing.
Or so. Yeah, that'd be about right. Bill was a huge fan, loved the band, and it was his really idea to get them to do that cover record. And so really Teen Babes was really guided by Bill. I think he was the one suggesting certain songs to be covered even. So he had a lot to do with that record.
Do you all go back to like high school or what? Because I know like Red Cross is in the very first film, but when they still spelled their name differently, Slog Film, and intimately
Right.
involved in both of the Teenage Love Dolls movie, and including co-writing the second one with you.
We all lived in different places. Red Cross were in Hawthorne down in the South Bay. I was in Santa Monica. Bill was in Moreno Valley, actually the city called Sunnymead, which doesn't exist anymore. It was literally wiped off the map and renamed. So Bill's from a town that doesn't exist anymore. And I mean, that's really fascinating too. It's really, Riverside County, the Inland Empire. It's very rural. It doesn't seem like California at all. It could be anywhere, USA. It's a lot more akin to many other places in this country. Just different vibe, a very conservative farming community.
So how did you all get to know each other so early in your respective creative?
It was punk rock that brought us all together. And, I didn't know Bill until around 81. And I didn't know the McDonald brothers until around the same time, even though we had been on the scene for a year or two at that point, but had yet to meet and become friends. But that all happened sort of around the same time.
And you were all teenagers at that point, yeah?
Still a teenager, just fresh out of high school for me.
Yeah.
Bill had actually been out of high school. He got out of high school at 15. And, was in college because he was just an incredibly bright guy, smart guy, like too smart in a way for his own good.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think we've all known super brainy people,
sure.
and a lot of the people I know that I would call geniuses, they didn't have it easy, and really all of them are gone. They're long gone. They checked out pretty young. I don't know what that's about, but I've noticed it happening, with more than one person that I've known. That's been the story.
Do you think they just feel like they don't fit in anywhere and that becomes a weight that's over time becomes too
Maybe
much
they're
to kind of
just
carry?
too smart to live in this world.
But I mean,
I
Bill Bartell still did an incredible lot of stuff in a relatively
Yes.
short period of time.
I mean,
Um,
he did an incredible amount of stuff. He had such an incredible influence, and he's just really this shadowy figure who not a lot of people really know about. It's not like his band was a success or huge or Bill was just kind of like known for just parroting things, parroting Black Flag. Black Flag would have been the biggest band in Southern California at that time. And Bill, of course, circumvented their whole thing to create his thing, which really kind of worked for him on this kind of underground level.
White Flag didn't sound like Black Flag, but the minute you hear the
No,
name,
not at all.
you immediately get the joke. Like you don't have to think twice. And that's kind of the brilliance of it, I
He
think.
was studying marketing at 15 in college,
Right,
and
right.
he learned all this stuff.
And I think innately, whether you study it or not, I think he's somebody who just kind of got it. 'Cause some people just
Yeah.
sort of, I mean, as much as I personally cannot stand the man, the guy that's currently in the White House, I've always said,
Oof.
has certain innate senses of certain things. He has this weird innate sense of media and manipulation.
Unlike Bill, he is not smart. The clown in the White House is surprisingly not smart. And
I agree.
anyways, let's not go down
Yes,
that road.
no, we don't need to. We don't need to.
No.
So I'm picturing you just out of high school, still in your teens and deciding that you're going to make a movie. And, maybe you think that's similar or maybe you think that's dissimilar to things that Bill Bartell was doing. Most people at that young of an age don't decide to do large creative projects,
I started a lot younger. I
Yeah.
started at the age of 12 or 11, even making films. And I was doing films before I got involved in playing music.
Okay.
I was just making films in the neighborhood, like a lot of filmmakers that start really young. Not that I could compare myself to Spielberg or what have you, but a lot of kids made Super 8 films in that era. It was more of a normal thing. I actually used my dad's 8mm camera. That's what I was using at first when I first started to learn how to shoot film. And it was just a process of a number of years of shooting film when I could. It was relatively inexpensive, but still there was the expense of buying the film and processing the film.
Sure.
A minimal expense for sure, but not as easy and accessible as kids now with their phones and TikTok or what have
Yeah.
you. I mean, I don't know if that's the same thing. I don't think it is, but it is still some sort of form of expression, maybe a little bit easier. There's just something about working in the world of film, even if it's the small gauge format. You were still shooting celluloid. You were still using, the physical components of the illusion of motion. The whole process from a very early age for me just captured my attention.
Were you thinking about editing things together? And similarly, I guess, at what point did you actually start editing?
Right away. I had to figure the process out as I went. Take a look at YouTube. Look at this film I made when I was 12 years old called
Okay.
Dynamite, like
Uh-huh.
Jimmy J.J. Walker, Dynamite.
Right. Yes.
I mean, you got to be older to know who Jimmy J.J. Walker is, kids out there, but, he
We're about
was
the same
a
age, you and I,
television
so.
personality. And his catchphrase was Dynamite. So I made this
Remember-
movie called
Yeah.
Dynamite. Really, from a young age, too, I was really plugged into pop culture and processing it in a way, and using it as sort of a starting point for my own things. My first film I made was a horror film that was inspired by my parents not allowing me to go see The Exorcist, which was an R-rated film and I
Yep.
was too far young to go see it. My Catholic mother forbid me from seeing it. So, of course, the more you tell a child no, the more
Yes.
he's going to go the other direction.
Absolutely.
So I learned at a very early age that I could do, and I did, and I continue to do. And that was my film school.
Okay.
And it was quite a number of years. It wasn't like I was versed in cinema. It wasn't like I had seen a lot of film. It was more of this kind of obsession of wanting to create and document.
So the Slog film is your first official film that got released, that got
No,
distributed? No?
I had written and directed Super 8 feature films prior to that.
Really?
Yeah, but I mean, one of them is on my YouTube channel, The Ominous, which I wrote a screenplay for at 15 and directed at 16. And that was out in the fall of 1980 in my neighborhood,
Right,
which
right.
coincided with me going deeper into the music scene, finally getting to see bands like X and the Dickies and the Go-Go's, and they really sort of pulled me into the local music scene that was happening. And I always really liked music from a young age, was very interested in music, and it was always a kid that made cassette tapes off the radio.
Yeah, oh yeah. Absolutely. When did you discover punk rock?
It would have been through New Wave in
Okay.
the late 70s, through
And through the
Bebo,
radio?
B-52s, the radio, Rodney Bingham, Rodney on the Rock on K-Rock. That's where I heard all the local stuff. Then Penelope Spheeris's Decline of the Western Civilization film.
That movie changed my life.
Yeah, that changed a
Absolutely.
lot of people's lives. And funny enough, I'm dealing with Penelope right now. There's some of her footage in my film, and I'm corresponding with her back and forth.
I saw Decline at the Del Amo Mall down in Torrance when I was staying with my grandparents. I was, I think, maybe 19 or something. And I just knew very little about it. And punk rock was not really what I was into. I went for like a 7 o'clock screening, and I was just completely blown away. And I remember there was all these punk kids, and I was at once fascinated and at the same time kind of terrified, because I was just, musically I was very sheltered. Like this was a whole new world, and holy shit, that film was just like open Pandora's box, and I couldn't get enough after that point.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, I would love to have her as a guest on this podcast, just because all those early Decline films I find fascinating, and like Suburbia. Not so much fan of the later stuff she did, but whatever. Good for her.
It's
she saw a lot of
amazing how
success.
much that film was the catalyst for so many people, I think, our age, to get directly involved into this music. The Slog movie was my ode to the Decline,
Okay.
my $2 version of it.
Right.
I mean, the Decline itself was a low budget film, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think my film's very different. My film also is reflective of my work prior to that. I mean, yeah, I've got all these punk rock bands, but in the middle of that, I've got these comedy sketches.
Right.
I mean, who would do that? I mean, obviously, I was just doing what I did, and then getting further down the rabbit hole of punk at that time. And yeah, it was one part fascination, one part, I wouldn't say terrifying, but some of it was kind of scary. Some of the bands, some of the people on the scenes, some of the violence that one would encounter at some of these shows. But it was easy to look past any sort of negative stuff because there was so much stuff happening, and there's so much stuff to document.
Yeah.
I also was really into photography as well as filmmaking. So, I photographed stuff. And then I did a fanzine, which also further got me to meet a lot of people. In fact, I think that's how I met Red Kross.
Oh, really? What was the fanzine? Would I know it?
The fanzine was called We Got Power. And there was a book put out in 2012 called We Got Power, hardcore punk scenes from 1980s Southern California, which has all the 5 issues of the fanzine in it, but also just all the photography that was done by myself and Jordan Schwartz, very old friend of mine, who is also in the Bill film. So,
and is that Schwartz related to Jordan Schwartz and Jennifer Schwartz? I'm assuming brothers and sisters. Yeah.
brother and
So
sister.
what inspired the Teenage Love Dolls films, which I find to be delightful in that sort of early John Waters, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park kind of, it's very DIY, technically not the most polished thing, but there's something about it, and there's such a kind of naive charm to the whole thing that I love them both. What inspired those films?
I think, again, that was just sort of a natural evolution of my filmmaking, and also where we were all going together as a group of friends, into this, further into music, into the scene. And I think a lot of the thrust of the first film was, here we are in the early 80s, and we're sort of waking up to the fact that we're not in the 70s anymore, and we were all kids during the 70s, and we were all raised by television, and we sat there and we watched these sitcoms, not only in the first run, but then every day after school, the
Right.
repeats of
Right.
the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family, and this sort of conditional programming that went along with it. When, I mean, these shows were great. Bewitched. I mean, we watched this stuff, and over and over again, it just became absorbed into our DNA. At a certain point, you had to sort of push it right back out. And I think the first Love Dolls film is that. And I think we were one of the first people to take a look at that era in the 70s, and just sort of, the era of the happy face, and just sort of turn it on its side. And I think also Jennifer had been in some films. Jennifer was in The Ominous, a movie that I made in 1980, my first scripted feature. I think she just wanted to play a larger role in my films, and she was the one that sort of came to me saying, let's make this film. I had the name The Love Dolls, and we created this world, just, probably in the course of a couple afternoons of discussion. And I was always more of a doer. I was always more instantaneous in my work. For me, at that time, a script wasn't important. We had an idea of what we wanted to do story-wise.
Right.
Even like that sort of evolved. And I was always really sort of fascinated by early Saturday Night Live, SCTV kind of parody, where sure they're reading from a script, but there is that element. All those people came from improv. They all came from that school of improv, where a certain thing could only happen in that situation. Hence, that same year, the release of This Is Spinal Tap, which was really done without a script as well.
Right.
To people that were just assuming these characters and winging it.
Were you a fan at all at that time of any of the early John Waters stuff?
The films definitely seem like early John Waters, for sure.
Right. Yeah, I
Just
think
because
so.
of the production value. Because,
When I say that, I mean it also as a compliment very much, because I love those early films.
it wasn't like I was trying to ape John Waters films.
No, I don't get that at all.
But I mean, I, of course, was very much into them. And I wasn't going to try to make my own version of Pink Flamingos.
Right. I just feel there's a similarity of spirit in terms of, like, you see John Waters, these early films, Pink Flamingos and Desperate Living, and you get the sense that these people are all part of this little scene, and
Yep.
they know each other and they're friends, and they're kind of all
Multiple
getting outrageous.
maniacs, especially. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And so I get that. I get the same scene watching the Teenage Love Dolls movies. I'm like, these guys are like this small, intimate group of people who are doing this creative thing and probably I'm guessing, having a ball. So with the second one, with Love Dolls Superstar, that one feels a lot more tightly scripted to me.
Again, there was not necessarily a script, but in that one, there was actually written dialogue that was done most of the time before the day of the shoot. I think because the first film came out and there was this response to it that sort of caught all of us off guard. I mean, all of a sudden, we had people's attention.
Fans.
And we had critics behind the film. So that did something. And you could see the difference from the first film to the second, for sure.
Big time. Absolutely.
And, all of that came into play, and it was just trying to step it up and do something again. I did not want to repeat myself with making the first Love Dolls film again. So that's why it's like, 180 degrees away from the first one, story-wise. It's a lot more expansive of story. It's basic of a story. I think that was just trying to do more with what, we had at the time. We didn't have much. We had a little bit more money to make the film,
Yeah.
to shoot
And
the film.
it shows. You can hear the difference in terms of just the better audio too,
Over the past year or two, I've been working on 4K restorations on both
Really?
films.
That's fantastic.
And they look and sound a way that they never have.
Can't wait.
Yeah. In between finishing the Bill film and now, I've done that work, and they're just about done. And they're also going to come out early next year or a few months into next year, along with the Bill film, which I think is going to come out early in the year at this point.
And when you say come out, you mean as a physical product, or you mean in
Physical media? There'll be a Blu-ray and a
Nice.
DVD. And it will be streaming as well. I mean, I think a lot of people that are tuned into our scene, I think, will want the disc because of, first of all, I also produced a 47-minute additional bonus movie.
Right.
In a similar way I did to 1991, The Year Punk Broke. When that finally came out in DVD in 2011, I had produced a 42-minute bonus movie. Rather than just stringing unused footage together, I actually put together what could be considered a mini film. And this is known as the Blue Scale on that disc. So I did a similar thing for the Bill film.
If you're enjoying this conversation, please make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. It's the quickest way to grow our channel, and it's absolutely free. You can also subscribe to our other channels on social media. Check out our Instagram at Creative Asylum CA, that's the letter CA, or on TikTok at The Creative Asylum, that's all one word. Our website is thecapod.com, and our Facebook profile is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. All right, back to the episode. Between Love Doll Superstar and 1991, there's kind of a large chunk of time between those two films. I'm assuming that Love Doll Superstar opened probably a whole lot of new doors for you. What were you doing professionally in terms of your filmmaking in between those two films?
Not much in the way of film per se, although I was involved in getting those early films out and doing screenings, doing that kind of stuff. Also, I was playing music and touring a lot in those years. My second band actually went on the road for 6 months in '86 and then did another couple months in '87. Once you go out on the road and you're doing that, you're really sort of consumed by that.
Yeah.
But so
and I feel
I
like I
think
should know your band, but I don't know if I do. What band
Sin
is that?
34 was the first band. Painted Willie was the second.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And Painted Willie got signed to SST.
Yep, I remember.
It was the bass player, Phil Newman from Sin 34, and I staying together. Phil Newman had a recording studio called Spinhead, where I lived and worked during the filmmaking of Desperate Teenage Love Dolls, in fact. And that's where we recorded all the music for both films. That's where our bands played and rehearsed, and lots of other bands played and rehearsed there and recorded there.
So like all the Red Cross stuff you hear.
Some of it, like from the first film, there was less new recordings. For the Love Doll Superstar, it was all entirely recorded, written and recorded out there at Spinhead for the film.
I'm curious where the connection with Sonic Youth happened. I know that their music is in Love Doll Superstar. Did you first connect with them through that or in the subsequent years in between? I guess I'm kind of curious how that tour occurred such that you were going on the road with them to Europe to make that film.
I first met them in the mid 80s, 85, 86. And yeah, the first thing that they did was give me the track for Love Doll Superstar. I'm sort of like Bill in that, mainstream's world doesn't know about me at all.
I mentioned with, the Sonic Youth film, Sonic Youth Nirvana film, whatever you want to call it. Literally the title, 1991, The Year Punk Broke, is more than just the title for that film, but that's something that's stuck much more globally. You've heard that phrase so many times in the years since, and I don't think most people are aware that that probably started with you. If I'm not mistaken, there's a book by that title as well. How long was that tour?
It was a short tour. It was just 2.5 week tour. What a time to be there.
Yeah.
And what, a whole thing to document. I mean, it's funny to me because the Slog movie, I started in 1981, and that was my first music related documentary, if you want to call it a documentary. And this is 10 years later. At that point, I had been involved in music directly. I had been in 2 bands. Both bands toured, but one of which that toured extensively. So my perspective had changed, and I had a lot more experience under my belt, as it were. I didn't necessarily want a career in music. It was just an interest that I was following at that time. One band led to another band, and it's just sort of the way it all worked out.
As it
In a
does.
sense, getting involved in the music, that pulled me away from film for a number of years because my time was being consumed. Not that I regret it, but I mean, I look back at it and it's just like, in a sense, maybe I wasn't the most prolific at a certain point, but at this point, I've done enough work that I think I've caught up. And I think, in a sense, I had to, meanwhile, I was trying to grow up myself, and it took me a number of years to do that. And maybe it was something that I was trying not to do as well. I didn't want to
Yeah.
join this crazy world. I mean, who
I-
does?
I don't think, I don't know. I don't think most people that I talk to spend their 20s working on growing up. They,
Right.
they're holding on to the thing that is slowly becoming more fleeting, because,
Yes.
becoming our parents doesn't seem like as fun of a prospect as creating stuff, be it music, be it film, whatever your thing is, but, maybe you're a visual artist. I don't know. I don't think most people are thinking in terms of like, I want to leave a legacy. I think they're just driven by this. I want to make stuff where things didn't exist before.
Absolutely.
People talk to me about the whole, like, I appear frequently enough on various podcasts and everybody wants to talk about the Seattle grunge scene. And like, what was it like? What was it like? And I'm like, what was it like? I was in a band and I was friends with people in bands and we were being in bands. We weren't going, oh my God, we are in the midst of something that's going to change history. Like that was never part of anybody's thinking, obviously, because you were in it in the moment, right?
You would have been laughed out of it if you would have had
Yeah,
if you
actually,
would have
truly.
said that at the time.
But after
Well-
everything broke, the entire attitude of everything did in fact change. And
The Year
suddenly
Punk
people
Broke
were
was really a jokey title. It wasn't meant to be
right.
taken literally.
But-
But it ended up having so many other meanings after the fact.
But it was
The
kind of
reference
spot
was
on.
not to Nirvana. The reference was to me seeing Motley Crue doing Anarchy in the
Yes.
UK. That's where the title came from. But obviously there was a lot going on, and there was a lot in the air at that time. Seeing Kurt with that theaters sticker on his guitar, vandalism is as beautiful as a cop in a rock's face.
Right.
Having grown up in Southern California punk, having seen the Feeders, and all
Yeah.
opening up for the Dead Kennedys and Flipper, and then, meeting someone like Cobain at that time. I felt like we had grown up in the same world and that we had the same totems of influence, Devo, Butthole Surfers, Black Flag, instantly relatable.
Yeah.
I don't know. He was a different person on that tour. I think pre-fame Nirvana, first of all, the band was on fire. And there's no doubt about that. They were firing on all cylinders. And I think it was his last happy moment.
Yeah. I have these 2 original photos from Charles Peterson that I bought probably 30 years ago. And one is a picture of Nirvana pre-Dave Grohl when Chad Channing was still in the band. And they're sitting in a field of flowers and it's sunny and the whole spirit of the picture is just light and joyous. And then there's this other photo of Kurt later, just him sitting on the edge of a bed. And it just feels so dark and heavy and brooding. And you look at those 2 and it is like a yin and a yang kind of thing. Those 2, it's like before they became famous and after he'd been kind of ravaged by all. And I do, I'm not trying to be dramatic when I say the word ravaged. I don't think Kurt was somebody that was well suited for that kind of attention and intense scrutiny and fame. And I think it just wore him completely down and ground his spirit down. And it was always something that was really sad to me, seeing that.
The story is a tragedy. Yeah.
It's horrible. Yeah, it really is.
We see Kurt Cobain at the beginning of my new film. Bill Bartell, again, was very good at siding up to people and whispering in their ears and influencing them. He was an influencer long before social media. He turned Kurt on to Os Mutantes and like that story that's in the film. He did this 10 years before that. In 1981, he sided up to Steve Harris of Iron Maiden backstage, faking a backstage pass, getting backstage, meeting his rock heroes, and struck up a friendship with Steve Harris and ended up naming an Iron Maiden album made in Japan.
Really?
That was Bill Bartell's suggestion to Steve Harris as to what they call their live EP. In fact, Bill encouraged him to put it out. Sort of weird influence that some kid from Podunk could have on the world. Again, circling back to Cobain and Bartell, why is it that these people from these backwoods burgs owning culture?
My question to you, I suppose, with Bill Bartell, what was it about him specifically? And in the film, it kind of explores how he just sort of would focus on something or some person and somehow just insinuate himself into the environment or into the situation or into a band or like into suddenly he's backstage with Iron Maiden. Like, this is not something that most people can just go, gee, I wish I could meet so-and-so and then do it. He did more than just meet them. He integrated himself into all of these different worlds that he was interested in. And so what do you think that was about? It's obviously a very curious, kind of mercurial sort of character, but there was something about him that gave him that superpower to be able to do that.
He was fearless. He was brazen. He was driven. He was a creative. He was an obsessive. He was out of his mind, but brilliant. Like many other people in a similar situation. Bill was my friend. And again, when you lose someone, it's like losing a piece of yourself. It's just, his passing was really hit me hard. And I think we see that at the end of the film.
And he was a young man.
He was. Well, as we get older,
relatively.
He was 52 when he passed, which is too young.
To me, that's a young man.
The older I get, everyone's, your perspective changes.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a much more refined perspective, and I think you could look at my work and just see a sort of evolution. And I think this film is maybe my most accomplished, mature work in a sense. It could also get to more people in a way that maybe some of my other films couldn't.
Sure.
I really tried to make this film for someone that doesn't know anything about the man.
Right. You succeeded.
And also, it's the first film I've made about a person. And with that came a really large responsibility for me. I didn't want to blow it. And it was someone that I knew as well. So I did not take this assignment lightly. And it was a narrative that I had to graft from 75 hours of interviews. When we started this interview, you and I today, you said you don't have anything prepared. I didn't go in with notes. I had nothing prepared. It was all in here. It was in here, but not on paper. It all comes from in here. Natural conversations amongst friends. Even though I didn't know everybody that I was interviewing in the film. Some people I knew of them and their work, but didn't know them well. But some people I knew and had relationships going back many years. But still, whether I knew them or didn't, it was always a very easy and flowing conversation to have. I put the film together in just, 8 months. I edited all of that in a pretty short amount of time. I did it all myself.
And that's typically how you work for the most part, correct?
I've worked with crews and editors and DPs, and I've had many different situations in my past work. This film is really sort of a return to a stripped down, bare bones, complete DIY affair.
I don't think it feels like it, though.
Technology's gotten so much better.
Yes.
My work has gotten better. as well.
I think this is your best film.
I feel like, pretentious saying such a
I'll say it for you. I think this is your best film. So I mean, I'm a huge fan of music documentaries, and I might call this a music documentary, but I might not. But the thing is, I've always thought that like the best music documentaries bring you along and keep you engaged, regardless of whether you know anything about the band or not. Or similarly, maybe you're not even a fan of the band. Maybe you know the band, but you're not a fan. And it doesn't matter because the story and the narrative and the people in the story are what drives it. And that's what's interesting. And I think that's what you succeeded to do with The Secret Lives of Bill Bartell is that, like I said earlier, on the one hand, I kind of knew who he was, but I ultimately, after seeing the film, realized I only knew certain aspects of him and certain worlds that he was part of or that he touched, right? But I was just like fascinated by this person, what he did, how driven he was, what I would call his superpowers, how he was able to focus on some little subculture or a world or a group or whatever and just say, I'm going to make myself part of that. And it's a fascinating thing to be part of, just to sort of be taken along on that journey. But I don't think many people could have made that film and been successful in that. And I think you were. And maybe that's because he was your friend, probably. But I think it's enormously successful in that regard. I definitely can't wait to watch it a second time and, maybe have a couple more people like, dude, you need to come over and see this film. I think it'd be right up your alley. And I'm glad you made it. And I imagine probably going to, like previous films, open up a lot of new doors that are maybe unexpected to new opportunities,
Hopefully
although you'll probably end up doing something completely different. I don't know. Do you have new works planned in your not too distant future? Like, do you know what the next film's going to be, or you're just working on like getting this out and getting the 4K restorations of the Love Dolls films?
I never know what I'm going to do next.
Okay. And you never know it's going to sort of trigger the next thing, I assume, for that matter. Right.
All of my films have all came from a certain place, and I have to, first of all, have an interest. There has to be this spark. There has to be something that's going to draw me to it. And interestingly enough, even the people that knew Bill for as many years as I did and some of my friends did, we still didn't know him, the whole of him. And that's why I think this film kind of hits, is because it's just like, it doesn't stop. It just keeps going. It's just layer after layer. And again, you don't have to be a fan of punk rock. You don't have to be a fan of White Flag. You don't have to be a fan of Black Flag, or in Bill's case, a Beatles obsessive or a Cheap Trick obsessive or a Blue Oyster Cult obsessive or a Kiss obsessive.
Right.
All of this stuff just played into him wanting to be up there on that stage, being Ace Frehley, who in a junior high school yearbook, he appeared as Ace Frehley. So
that's awesome.
I'll know it when I know it, and what I'm going to do next. And I have to wait. I can't force it. I can't make it happen. I have to be interested. I have to be engaged. Then it happens.
But you've been doing this for over 40 years, and that process has always served you, right?
Doing it since I was a child, and doing it,
which is amazing.
There's something to be said for someone that was completely self-taught. Maybe not everything would be digestible or something that a lot of people would want to see, but that was never my motivation. I was just doing what I was doing and exploring the medium and learning as I went, and a Rolling Stone gathering moss.
I'm going to ask you one final question.
Sure.
You've been doing all of this stuff for most of your life, and clearly it's served you well. Is there anything that you do or think just in your life and on a daily basis that always keeps you moving forward towards whatever the next creative thing, regardless of whether or not you know what that thing is going to be?
Well, just trying to stay focused, motivated in a world that is increasingly growing darker and difficult. But I think I had a really good education in the sense that I've lived through really dark times before. It's really just about perseverance, sort of standing your ground and trying to stay sane in a world that's completely mad.
You think that the process of being creative is a big part of what keeps you sane?
I think the process of being creative is what saved me my whole life. I think I got through a very dark childhood with the ability to create. I think it's what saved me, and I think it's what keeps me going as well.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Creative Asylum. A quick favor before you go. If you liked this conversation, please be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday at 10. You can find us on Instagram and on YouTube at Creative Asylum CA. That's Creative Asylum and the letters CA. Our website is thecapod.com. And our Facebook is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. Until next week, when we'll have a new conversation with another creative disruptor, stay creative in life and at work.